Hello, my love, and welcome to this video. I am showing you, or I am going to show you, parts of my Trauma Healer certificate. My Trauma Healer certificate is my baby, it's my legacy. It's a 1 year training program that we will be together in for 12 months, side by side, a small amount of people, 5 to 6 participants, intimate space where I train you to become deeply human. I train you how to heal trauma, how to support your clients the best, and how to get rid of so many things that they've been carrying on for the rest of their lives. So I decided to bring you a couple of videos from my module, and I decided to have this introduction beforehand so that you know, oh, okay, so this is what we're going to see. And at the same time, I want you to just be aware this is free knowledge, right? This is stuff that I'm giving out for free that usually costs starting at 14 to 16k euros a year, because this is a very specialized training. My promise is not only that I will support you get rid of most of your trauma, but also that you will start your business during that year and that you will get clients during that year, because essentially I require you to. It's part of the requirement process of getting your certificate at the end of the year. So the Trauma Healer is yeah, there's nothing else I can say other than it's my legacy, and you'd have to experience it yourself, and only a few people will in this lifetime, just because I'm keeping it very intimate, very private. And the only way to become a trauma healer is to actually go to a one-to-one with me. That doesn't need to be long-term, that can even be short-term one-to-one, but I need to know you before we start working together for such a long amount of time, because this is a really intimate commitment, and I don't want anybody there who's not willing to put in the work and the time and who's just sabotaging themselves the entire time. Been there, done that. I want to work with people who know exactly what they want, who want to achieve great things in this world, and whether that is leaving the system or supporting people in leaving the system or revolutionizing stuff, you have to know that this training is going to be the hardest and the toughest thing that you've ever done in your life, no matter how much tough shit you've done. You think your trauma was tough? I'm going to be tougher. So, without further ado, and if you're watching this again, you can skip this part, love. Yeah, you can skip this part. I cannot wait to introduce you to my body of work and have fun. Hello and welcome to the second module. I always say module, right? But to the second learn part, which is the brain. So, without further ado, what are the learning goals? We're going to look at how the brain is structured, which areas are important in our work with clients, which nerves are found in the brain, the intro to social engagement system, and the vagus nerve. So, what is going to be important about all of this, because this is quite a lot. I just want you to know where things are as opposed to what are they all called, okay? So I'm just going to quickly go and skim through these, because these will be important when you do work with the social engagement system. As you can already see here, the eyes are part of the social engagement system as well. So we have the cranial nerve 1, which you'll see here. Let me just look for it, because this is always... cranial nerve, where are you? Which is the nervus olfactorius. There you go. Well, I should have just followed the numbers. So here you go. Cranial nerve, which is 1. Nervus olfactorius, which is the olfactory nerve. This is the nerve that, as you can already see, remember from the... I think it was the unipolar, I'm not quite sure, the neuron that has that is connected to everything that has like a taste bud, a smelling bud of sorts, where you get, like, especially here with the olfactory nerve fibers, where you have the information of smell. And the function is transmission of signals from the nose to the brain. Olfactory bulb is the part that sends the signal of the smell, and then the nature of nerve fibers is sensory. So we always have these 3 things: the function, the origin, and the nature of the nerve fibers. The cranial nerve 2 is the optic nerve, also very, very easy. Optic nerve, as you can hear in the word, is the nerve that transmits the signal from the retina to the brain. it's the primary visual cortex, and it's a sensory type of nerve fiber. Then we have the third, which is the oculomotor nerve. This is responsible for eye movement, motor function of the pupils. This is going to be so important later on. And the origin is in the midbrain. As you can see here, the midbrain, which the pons is connected to, or part of. And this is somatomotor and vegetative. Then we have the cranial nerve 4, which is the orbicularis oculi muscle, or nervus trochlearis, the trochlear nerve. This is control of the oblique superior eye muscle, and also somatomotor. I'm not going to read everything, but just to give you the trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve, nervus trigeminus, is super important because this nerve is transmitting of sensitive sensations in the facial area and control of chewing movements. The trigeminus nerve is so easily stimulated when you touch the face and is part of the social engagement system. All of these, by the way, are part of the social engagement system, I think, except the accessory and the hypoglossal, because they are connected with something else as well. But most of these are part of the social engagement system. So, the nervus abducens is the eye movement, motor function of the pupils. Yeah, this is also so interesting how we have so many nerves, like the optic nerve, oculomotor nerve, the abducens nerve, that are all connected to sight, right? Then when we go on, we have the cranial nerve 7, which is the facial nerve, or nervus facialis, control of facial expressions and transmissions of taste sensations. Then we have the cranial nerve 8, which is the nervus vestibulocochlearis, not to be mistaken with cock, yeah. Auditory and vestibular nerve. Transmission of information from the ear. So this is hearing, this is balance. Right, then we have the glossopharyngeal nerve, which is the control of swallowing, also very interesting. Then we have the vagus nerve that we already talked about in the last video. This regulates the internal organs, for example, for digestion, and is the main nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system. And remember, when we looked at the visuals last time, the vagus nerve really goes down all the way to the digestive tract. So this is part of the autonomic nervous system. Yeah. So that's why the nature of the nerve fibers is varied. Then we have the nervus accessorius, which is responsible for head rotation and shoulder elevation. So I don't really consider this nerve part of the social engagement system anymore because, yeah, okay, sure, you can rotate your head away and then you won't be in connection with somebody. Sure, you could do that. But, yeah, it's one of the minor nerves. And then the nervus hypoglossus, which controls the tongue movement. Okay, obviously, if, you stick out the tongue, then it could mean one thing, but then you need the tongue to speak. And, yes, so this is quite awesome. So the nerves in the brain, I just wanted to show you a different type of picture where you can see the trigeminus nerve here, especially, right? It's basically just showing you all of the nerves again, but I want to stress the importance of the trigeminus nerve, that you can see the ocular nerves. I'm just gonna put them together. We have the oculomotor nerve, optic nerve. I'm just gonna call them the ocular nerves to just have this one shared language of it. Again, we won't be needing them in detail because we just need to look at the result of these nerves, right? You don't need to learn all of the names or something like that. And also found it interesting that the facial nerve is not only for the facial expressions, but also taste perception in the front 2/3 of the tongue. So this is something, right? And the glossopharyngeal nerve is the back of the tongue, the throat, and the pharynx. Let's see if there's anything else that you need to know. No, that's fine. Alrighty. So moving on, structure of the brain, just to give you an overall view of the structure and function of the human brain. So we have the cerebral cortex. This is so when people talk about the brain in nervous system world, they always talk about these 3 layers. They talk about the prefrontal cortex. They talk about the amygdala or the limbic system, which is in the center of it, and they talk about the reptilian part of the brain, which is this bottom part. I don't really like to differentiate it like that because the brain is more complex than its parts, basically. And of course, there are parts like the brainstem that is responsible for breathing, that's responsible for movement, that's responsible for like basic survival. Yes. However, this can quickly be, let me just not say shut down, this can quickly be circumvented, kind of like you don't need to just react from your reptilian brain, if I'm gonna call it that. But this is the type of brain stuff brain content that we share with reptilian animals as well. So yeah, this is the big things. The cerebral cortex has different areas, which I'm going to show you later. We have the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is the mid part of the brain, essentially, and it's connecting the two left and the right hemisphere of the brain to each other. Then we have the limbic system here, which you will see the thalamus, you'll see the pineal gland, you'll see the fornix, the hypothalamus. Amygdala is not here, but should be somewhere here. Then we have the pituitary gland right here. It's always like pituitary gland and pineal gland are in direct opposition to each other, and the pineal gland is a little bit farther towards the back, whereas the pituitary gland is a little bit more front. So it's always said that the pituitary gland is the third eye and the pineal gland is like the crystalline whatever. But then I'll get to that later when we look at the spiritual meaning of all of this. Then we have the brain stem, which is comprised of the midbrain, the pons. The pons is going to be very important, especially for reaction, which I'm going to share you later. The medulla oblongata, the spinal cord, the cerebellum. All of these are so interesting when it comes to fight, flight, freeze responses. Yeah, I'm not going to go too far into colliculus. That's not that important for us, but yeah. Alrighty. Let us go into the details. So we have the frontal lobe, and I just decided to just go with a general location so that you have a general idea. The frontal lobe is the primary motor cortex. It has the Broca area, which is responsible for speech and for language. It has, and language memory, right? Eye movements, the frontal association cortex, seat of personality, planning and organization of actions. When we look at seat of personality, I'm sure you've heard, especially if you studied psychology or if you've done trainings like these, you've heard of this case. I keep on forgetting what his name was. This dude who had like a metal bolt, not even a bolt, it's like almost like a tube running through his head, like it was pierced through his head, and his personality had completely changed. When it was removed, I don't know if he reverted back, but it was to show that when you harm the frontal lobe, your personality will change. And this is why when we look at lobotomy has been used. This is a practice that has been used in psychology or in psychotherapy in the early, I don't know when exactly it started, but it's like early 20s, 30s, 40s. That's when it had its peak in the Second World War. And then I think in the 50s, they stopped using it. And that's where they would ram like not a needle, that's the wrong word, like a little bolt or like a nail through the eye, through the sockets of the eye, but like the left or the right side, not right through the eye, of course, and into the brain to stimulate, basically. Stimulate, rather, it's actually rather harm the frontal lobe to incite personality changes, basically. That's what they did. So planning and organization, subjective evaluation of sensory impressions, decision-making, problem-solving, emotion regulation, impulse control. So important that this is in the frontal lobe because, as I said earlier, we have inside of this, you can't see it from the outside, but inside of it, we have the limbic system, which is responsible for the emotions, which I'll tell you about later. And we have this three-part switch, right? We have the switch from brainstem, from the very reptilian to the emotional to the frontal. And the frontal is very problem-solving, very decision-making, very rational almost, and it controls your impulses. So this is something that you want your clients to be in. You want them to be functioning primarily in their frontal lobe. And this can also lead to adaptation social behavior. So this is where you can influence the most in the way we heal people, or we trauma heal, basically. Center for voluntary control of urination and defecation. This is also quite interesting. So when that whole frontal lobe gets shut off, the voluntary control for urination, defecation is impaired as well. So when we look at the parietal lobe is responsible for processing sensory information such as touch, pressure, vibration, temperature, and pain. So the nerves that I explained in the previous learn module basically are found also in the parietal lobe, especially the temperature. Information about the position and location of body parts in space. This is what I mentioned earlier is proprioception. Conscious perception of these impressions, assignment to corresponding body regions, and differentiation according to intensity and type of perception. So this basically means that I can consciously perceive what is happening where in my body. If I lift my arm up, you can't see what I'm doing, but just assume you're lifting your right arm up, you know exactly that it is going at a certain speed and at a certain intensity, and you have the ability to perceive that type of speed and intensity. Spatial orientation, where are you? Where is your body in space? Working with numbers, arithmetic, writing, and reading. Coordination of movements with visual, auditory, and vestibular. Vestibular is always balance. Impressions. Then we have the occipital lobe. I don't know why, but I love the name. I don't know. No clue. Occipital. I just like it. Occipital lobe is the primary and secondary visual cortex. So this is the funny thing about our visual cortex is that it's at the back of our brain. So when we hit the back of our head, sometimes it elicits like if you can't really see well anymore for a little bit, because that's where our visual cortex is located at. So conscious perception, processing, interpretation, recognition of visual information. The area at the transition between the occipital and parietal lobes is responsible for the formation of eye movements and enables the eyes to follow a moving object. Love that. That's so amazing. And now I want to show you like the optic nerve and how it actually functions, because it's so amazing to see, the right left brain hemispheres and the right left brain responses and all of that. And so here we have the primary visual cortex that's at the occipital lobe. There we go, the occipital lobe. Then we have the optic radiation. So this is basically a nerve, and then the superior colliculus, which is another part of your, I have to look back, I forgot again. It's part of the, it's part of the center of the brain of the limbic system, I believe. Let me just go back forth. Yeah. And then we have the optic chiasm. This is so interesting because I'm sorry. This is actually part of the midbrain. Yeah, you'll see that later. I'll give a more detailed explanation of that later. So you have the optic chiasm. The optic chiasm is responsible for the crossing of the nerves. And as you can see, the optic radiation coming from the left, I'm just going to call it for what it is, optic radiation. The optic radiation coming from the left side is going to go to the left side. It's called temporal, at least in this, because temporal is the outside, right? Going to the left side of the left eye and the left side of the right eye. So it crosses here, right? And then this optic radiation, so the green line, goes into the right visual field. That's where you have the thing with left is right is left with the eyes, right? So it crosses here, it goes to the left, and is responsible for the right visual field, because this is what it can see. Get it? Like, it has more ability to see this way because this is where the retina is, remember? And has to go through the retina, which is why this is responsible for the right visual field. And when I understood that, I was like mind blown, because I never really understood from the perspective, like, because I don't wear glasses and things, so I wouldn't know why the left side was responsible for the right field and vice versa. So on the other side, we have exactly the same thing. The right optic radiation goes to the right side, and this in the right eye, the temporal side, and then on the left eye, the nasal side. Nasal just means towards the nose, right? And temporal means towards the temple. And then it goes to the left visual field. Amazing. I mean, if you're a nurse, if you've studied this, you probably know this already, but I just find it amazing. And this is one of the most important parts of the social engagement systems, which is the eye. Because when we can see how people look at us. We have the right focused vision, we have the left focused vision where you look into the left side of the eye or the right side of the eye. I don't personally put interpretations to that, so I just take it for what it is. Especially when you work with people live, but knowing this will impact the way you just help people look at you, help people focus, right? All right. We will still be talking way more about the optic nerves and like the social engagement system when we talk about the techniques that you can use. But this is really more structured on the brain and its functions. So we have the temporal lobe, which is primarily the auditory cortex, as you can see, because it's where the ears are, right? For processing auditory information and parts of the sensory language center, which is called the Wernicke's area. It's quite German, Wernicke. And this is where we process the sensory language. Understanding written and spoken language is also found there, right? So with the Broca area, it's more of the languages itself. And here it's more the listening, understanding, written and spoken language. Then we have that something, and this is so peculiar, right? Because it's inside of the brain. This is the insular cortex, the cortex insularis, that is usually not shown in the big brain kind of pictures. And this is the gustatory cortex. This is the cortex for taste, which is responsible for processing taste perceptions. We have the smell perceptions here as well, and the processing of emotions, the subjective evaluation of smell and taste, meaning do you find it disgusting or not, right? And the emotional evaluation of pain. So to us, trauma healers, this cortex insularis is important. Will you mention it to your client? Probably not. You're probably not going to be, oh, your cortex insularis is evaluating the pain in a very emotional way. No, you're probably not going to say that. But it's just important for you to know where it's located. Receives information about nausea or bloating from the internal organs. This is also very important because when you deal with somebody who has a phobia of being nauseous or a phobia of vomiting, I just forgot the word, but I will get to that later. It is just super important to know where in the brain that is connected to. So, brainstem. I love this one. The mesencephalon is in there, which is the midbrain, which is like here, like a bit of this part. This is the mesencephalon. The bridge, the pons, is also, you can't see it, it's hidden. And the medulla oblongata, which is the extended core, which is already this part as well. They regulate vital functions such as breathing, blood pressure, heart rate, protective reflexes. They're important pathways for sensitivity and motor skills, like the most important, because without this brainstem, you die. They're responsible for the fight, flight, freeze, survival responses, and these are also called the reptilian brain, as previously mentioned. Now, this is mostly in German, but I'm going to translate it to you if anything is unclear, okay? So now we're focusing on the mesencephalon, the midbrain. If you want to learn some German, you'll find it here. This is an important core for motor function, like arms, legs, and stuff. Unconscious and automated movements, support and holding motor functions, and mass movements of the torso and extremities. Extremities, hands and legs. I mean, dude, hands and legs. Arms and legs, sorry. Muscle tone, and it is responsible for core areas of cranial. Oh, this is where the core areas of cranial nerves 3 and 4 are located at. Right. Then we have the pons. The pons is a transit point for ascending and descending fiber pathways. Remember when we talked about afferent, sensory going up, and efferent descending fibers towards the motor, whatever motor places. And this is the switching station for motor fibers. So this, again, pons is going to be super, super important for you later on. Correction and fine-tuning of planned movement and sequences. The core areas of cranial nerves 5, 6, 7, and 8. Parts of the reticular formation, a network-like system of neurons for vital processes. This is where you have attention and alertness, regulation of circulation and respiration, So breath and circulation of the blood circulation. Control of vertical and horizontal eye movements as well. Functions such as swallowing, salivation, gag reflex, vomiting, pain modulation, muscle activity, and muscle tone. That's that little big fella right here, the fat thing. And then we have the medulla oblongata. I just said sometimes I have jokes, within this. So this I just like heard an Australian accent. The medulla oblongata. I'm really bad with Australian accents, but like it just sounded so funny when I say it. So the medulla oblongata is or basically is responsible for control of vital functions such as breathing, circulation, and vomiting. So as you can see, they're all quite similar, right? They all have shared functions. Coordination of movements of the extremities, trunk, and speech muscles. It has the posterior column, the funiculus posterior, which is the information from the body's periphery regarding surface and deep or depth sensitivity. Proprioception is what you will find here. Transmission of pain, temperature, and rough touch. Part of the vomiting center. Nausea can be triggered here, among other things, because the blood-brain barrier is lifted in this area. That's also important for you to know. Then we have the cerebellum. Not to be mistaken with the cerebrum. Sometimes I mix the two up, but cerebellum, cerebrum, right? Cerebellum is in German we call it the small brain instead of the midbrain, right? Midbrain, small brain. It is the it's basically like a little brain in itself because it's responsible for coordination and control of movement sequences, such as holding and supporting motor skills, stable gait, so how to walk, and eye movements. It is the motor integration center, so does not generate its own movement impulses, but processes and coordinates sensory motor information from other areas of the brain. That's what this little fella is responsible for. I think I need to mention something before we go here. And this is this comes from martial arts experience. When you pierce the occipital lobe, and the occipital lobe is very easily accessible. So if you touch the back of your head, there is a little, how do I call this? Just like a little drop that happens. So pretty much at the back of your head, when it kind of goes down, you can actually reach into it. This is the access to your occipital lobe. If I pierce something sharp, I don't know how this information is ever going to be useful to you, but I hope it serves you well. If you have a situation where you're in a life and death situation, when you pierce that part here basically, you can die. Very easy because it's like the skull has a pathway for you to just pierce it. So just letting you know that. I just felt like this was important information to share. You might save your day, right? Or your life. Either or. Happy to oblige. The limbic system. Yes, now we can finally see the limbic system. And now you can also see the amygdaloid body. So this is where the amygdala is. The limbic system is processing and evaluation of emotions and fear. It controls the drives that we have, including sex drives, stuff like that. Learning and memory formation, because our memory is very easily influenced by emotions. Then the drive itself, regulation of vegetative reactions, releases endorphins and opioids. So this is what we have here. As you can see, we have the pineal gland, the fornix, the corpus callosum, and the hypothalamus, mammillary. Like I don't really go into much detail in this one. We will go into detail later on as well. So I thought this was quite helpful for you to see what is responsible for which. So again, here just the regions, then higher mental functions, eye movement, speech, voluntary motor function, association, sensory hearing, language comprehension, and so on. The thing is, with this, the brain is communicating with each other, right? The more you lose it, the stronger it gets. If you don't use it, it's going to get weaker. It's the same with languages. So when it's spoken to higher mental functions, this is really being able to, as I said, what the frontal lobe is responsible for, being able to make decisions, being able to rationally think, right? then yeah, you can see all the spots here, all the spots highlighted. Somatosensory association is here at the back. Language comprehension is here on the side. Yeah, and vision, of course, at the back of the brain. And that's already it from the brain. This is just an intro of the brain specifically. When we look at trauma and the brain, this is going to come up later. Thank you so much for listening and happy learning.